Hopefully that should be back now. So please let me know. I'll wait for a little bit. So what I was saying was hi to everyone and a little bit about what we're doing this morning. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of design in Affinity Designer, showing you a little bit on nodes, dare I say, and also a little bit on how we can use stroke to actually do the work for us. So I will go back to my mornings. So morning Delcy, morning Sally, morning Deb, morning Jill, morning Tracy, and hopefully you can probably hear me louder than normal because I turned the mic up a bit. So I do apologise if it's too loud, do let me know. So it was just that for whatever reason the streaming software had kicked off the mic. Really useful. Okay. So I'm going to start off with playing with just basic shapes. So it doesn't matter what size document you're working in, I just want you to actually have a little go at this one, so particularly when you're in the book group. So I'm going to show you a few different little tricks and tips. So I'm going to go to the square star tool, and I'm just going to press and hold shift and drag my shape, that way I know it's nice and in proportion. Hi Verna. So there's our square star, and you can see at the moment it's got a load of dots, and that's because we've got our dotted line on. I'm just going to turn that back solid for now, and I'll take the line width down a little so you can see the shape. Let's zoom in. So at the moment this shape is still exactly that, it's a shape, and it will tell you what it is in the layers palette. So this is a really good obvious clue that that shape is still a shape and not a path. So if we have any of our shape tools activated, you'll see these little red dots. And what that means is that you can actually interact with an element of your shape without having to worry about nodes. So we want to try and get this where we kind of, let's go back there. I'm going to go in the middle. Wow, Deb. Mind you, I have to say, we've spent the weekend having a major clear out. So everything is looking pretty tidy in here, and we've had a bit of a move around with shelves and things that weren't working for us. So Ian was out being handy with his drill. Doesn't last very long, bless it. So it's a case of drill 4 holes and go back on charge. Okay, so while it's in this format we can do the edit, but if we want to do anything else to it, it's going to start complaining. So up in our top bar here you've got a button that says convert to curves. So if we press that, you're going to see that your bounding box is going to come in, because now it's just looking at those nodes rather than the shape. Your shape in your layers palette is changed to a curve rather than being a square star. And if we go to our node tool, which is the third one down, or press A, you can see that we can now see our nodes. So this is going to look a little bit different if you're working in Illustrator, but the theory is exactly the same. Okay, so you've got a few less options in terms of shapes in Illustrator than you have in Affinity. One of the reasons why I like Affinity, because I'm lazy. Right, Delsey, even though you've only got canvas, you can still do your nodes. So don't think that because I'm doing it in Affinity, you can't do this. Okay, everything I'm going to do today you can still do, pretty much, with the exception of a couple of things. Okay?
Morning everyone.
Okay. And bye everyone. So now if we click and drag over our nodes, you can see that the ones that we've selected are now blue. Okay, so I'll do that again and you can see they're still active. Now what that means is that we can do things like moving them around all in one go. So if we want to do a quick warp like that, we can do, which is really useful for when we're starting to do flowers. We can also rotate that selection if we want to. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this one down here. So one of the other things that we can do is we can start to work in symmetry. So if we've got this point here and this one here, we can use our corner rounder to smooth off that shape there. So we're slowly going to start making this look more petal-like, okay? Now, how you would do that in Canvas is instead of trying to click and drag it inwards, you're going to turn on your handles. So if you're not sure how to do that, I will go into that a bit later, okay? There are some other videos that I've done on nodes in Canvas that I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure Tracy can point you in the direction of. So likewise down here, we can do the same here. We get a rounded point. But what if that isn't what we want? So up in our corner type up here, you can see we've got a few different options. So obviously, if our corner type is square, it's going to go back to how it was. If it's curved, it's going to be how it is now. But we can also do things like bevels. And even take that corner out completely. And what that is actually doing is not changing the node at all. It's changing the appearance of the node. So you can see the nodes are still here. So nothing is actually set in stone until you hit that vague appearance. This is something to bear in mind if you're exporting to SVG, because sometimes you can find when you send it to your scan and cut, it won't actually see these bits unless you've pressed that button. So it's always good practice to make sure that you are baking in anything that you are putting on. So for instance, another option is the offset function. So that's another one where you would want to make sure you use your bake. So if I reduce this back out and we can see what bake does. So if I go bake, you can see suddenly we have these extra nodes. Okay, so in Canvas DLC you would just have this one here, but two handles extending out either side. So if I click on that, it's not going to let me know. Come on, be nice, there we go. There's two handles. And yours will go out further, but you won't have these ones. Okay, so once we have these nodes, what else can you do? Well, there's lots. We can start to use those individual points to put in a wobble, which, while you can't see right now what I might want to do, we can start to actually create something that looks more fluted, like a flower. So let's go more this way. We can start to actually create this point in here, so we can use our handles to take our curve out one way or the other. So I'm going to take this bit wider and hopefully you can see what I'm starting to build. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit of a shape going. I'm going to pull this one out this way so it curves this same way as this one. Now with this one here, I'm thinking that it might be that it's starting to taper off perspective wise. So we can still go back at this point and use that same tool. So it's never closed off unless it's a curved point. So the round circles are your curved points and your square are the other like corner nodes, the cusp nodes. And those are the ones that are happy to have this done. Okay. So I'm going to pull that in a little bit more. And bake appearance. I'm going to go back to my node tool. Click on this node so we can see this handle here. And we can pull that outwards. And we can do the same this side. So, I'm going to drag that in. Bake appearance. And go back to your node tool. It's really easy to make the mistake of thinking that you're somewhere that you're not at this point. I'm going to pull that one up as well so it matches this side. Okay, so you can see straight away we're creating something that is essentially a really complex shape, but all we're doing is just using the tools that are in this program. So we're not having to trace something and get really fiddly. We can just go, right, okay, we're going to pull that in there, warp that there, and it's fine. So don't ever think that nodes are these scary things that you can't use. Now it's slightly different in Canvas in that you don't have some of the tools like the corner rounder we don't have, but quite often you'll find there's at least a basic shape that has a softer edge that you can use for this. If not, there are lots of free design software out there that you can use to extend Canvas. So things like Inkscape you could use to do the same technique, which is totally free, and I will be doing some tutorials on that too, just so that we can add those to the Drawing with Vectors group. Okay, so let's pull this in here. I'm going to pull this in quite a long way, and if we go right in, you'll see it gets to this maximum point. So I'm going to go like that. I can do the same over here, so click on the node and click and drag that in. Okay, I'm going to bake it. Then with these next 2 points, so we can still use our shift to click multiple nodes with the tool. I'm going to drag it in. And you're going to say, and it's going to hit that maximum because you've got that node to that right hand side. Okay, so I'm going to bake that there. Now, change over to your node tool. And you can see we've got these two nodes, and at the moment they're going to be pretty evenly matched. So what I want to do, thank you, let's go that way.
Bye everybody.
And they're pretty easy to match. You don't have to be uber accurate with something like this. And there's that one there I just missed. There we go. So in a matter of minutes we've drawn a nice flower. So if we wanted to, we could add a little bit of detail for the centre. So I'm just going to do a nice simple U, so that I've got a bit of a dip into the centre of my flower. And let's do some little ovals. Now if Snap gets annoying, you can always turn it off temporarily by pressing and holding the Alt button when you're moving stuff, just so that you can get things where you want them. So I'm going to put that up in the air because it's slightly smaller. It's going to look like it's further back. Okay, and again I'm going to do 5 of these, I think. Actually, let's get rid of that one and go for another small one, so it doesn't look like one's just randomly. I'm just going to rotate that as well. So you always get a little bit of a curve from nature. Nothing stands up perfectly oval. So by just tilting those, it's going to look a bit more natural already. And I'm just going to add some stems. So I'm just using the pen tool, which is P, clicking and dragging to do the curve, pressing V to change the arrow tool and click off it. So in Canvas you can still use the pen tool in exactly the same way, but you just double click on that last point to finish the line. So at the moment these are all single lines. So if we're drawing this is fab, because that's going to be exactly where your pen is going to draw. But if you're cutting, what you're going to end up with is some ovals that are cut out, and then you've got these random lines in the middle. Now that may be what you're going for, but I somewhat doubt it. So if you're looking to create an outline design, what we actually want to work with is line thickness. So I'm going to highlight it all. Now this bit in Canvas, Delcy, you won't be able to do because Canvas just ignores line thickness. You can't kind of expand the stroke, unfortunately, yet. Give it time, it'll get there. It will. It's just needs a little push in that direction. So if you're doing this on Canvas, what I would suggest is you create it this far, draw it out on your machine, scan it back in, and then use the little outline setting on your scan to cut data, and it will actually trace both the inside and outside of the line, and then you can work from there with offset to do this next bit. So let me know if you need me to go back over that again. So I'm going to increase my line width. Now if you look at our centre shape, we probably don't want to go too thick because we want to make sure that we keep that oval open. So I'm going to go about there. But then our outside shape we can go a little bit thicker on. So I'm just going to select that on its own. Make that a bit thicker. So at this point we've got an outline that we could cut out if we went to expand stroke. But before we do that, we don't have to keep that outline as a really boring set width. We can actually use pressure, or in Illustrator the line width tool can do this, to actually manipulate how that line goes. So you don't even need a graphics tablet to do pressure and affinity, which is one of the really cool things with affinity over Illustrator. So I can reduce that. Make sure your shape is selected, there we go. Reduce it. And it's going to look like all you've done is just slide this width down here. That's not what's happening. What it's doing is all the way around here it's saying that pressure's just sitting just over 50%. Okay. If we put another dot in the middle, so just click and we push it up. At this point here, it's going to be using the full 6-point width. Okay. Likewise, if we add another dot here and we take this all the way down here, it's going to go all the way to 0. So although when we hover over it, you can see that there is that blue line of the path, there's no stroke applied at that point. That's fine, Delcy. If ever you need just a little one-to-one on anything, just let me know. Likewise, you can see that we have marks for 25 and 75. But you don't have to keep to those points. We can set that at any point along this line, and we can set any point this way too. So if I do something like this, where it's suddenly going from one to the other, you're going to see that there is a sudden dip here. That's because it's going from being the 6 point to being 3 points because it's more or less at 50%. It's going to dip slightly under that because your pressure is always going to be a curve. So it's never just going to go and drop and straight. It's always going to have a little bit of a trough after it to curve back up. And the more we take up that line, the smoother that change is going to be. So we're just looking just here. So when we start to play with pressure, you're going to start to get more of a kind of arty feel about it. So it's going to start looking more like it's a rubber stamp or something like that, rather than dies typically have quite a set line width throughout them. Whereas if we start to play with line width, we're actually going to start making it look like we've taken it beyond a die and actually started to push our scanning cut a little bit more. Yet all it's doing is it's still going to be following paths. Is that how you can control shading as well as just for the stroke? Okay, so this is just for stroke width at this point. If you want to start getting into fancy thing with brushes, there's a little brush icon on the end that we can use, and we can start doing really funky things with brushes. But for the sake of our scanning cut, you're better off using that solid stroke and then manipulating the pressure, because it gives you a nice crisp line to do your expand stroke on. Whereas if you start using something that's a little bit more textured, you could find that you start to have little bits that your scanning cut just can't handle. So let's sort out this line here, because we want it to be a nice outline. And I'm just going to take this up a little bit so that we start to have a bit of a stronger outline. So you can see our pressure is actually quite a funny shape here, but we can get really intricate with it if we want to. So we know this drop here is just here, so working back round this side here, we can actually start to manipulate it, or even that's like that. The other thing that we can do is we can actually reverse our path so it applies that pressure the opposite way round. But just for now, we'll go on that one. Okay. Just want to thicken that up there a little bit, and then I'm going to add a little bit more interest as it tucks back round there. So you can really see how just playing with that pressure can really make a difference to your shape. Let's pop that up to 100. Oh, maybe not. It's a little bit too full on just up there. Now, the next button to make sure that you tick once you are happy with using your line width is this one here that says Scale with Object. So what that means is if I then scale my shape, it's going to keep that line width in proportion to the size of the shape. Otherwise, if you, for example, applied a really thick outline to a big shape and you scaled it down, all you're going to end up with is a blob. Okay? Whereas scale actually changes that thick line in proportion to the shape so that it keeps a nice frame. So you definitely want to make sure that one is ticked whenever we are using pressure. So let's take these little centre elements, and I'm just going to scale those up a little bit so you can see what I mean. So there's our centre elements, and we haven't got Scale with Object ticked. So if I then enlarge those, if I put the bounding box on, let's group them for a second actually. I'm going to just drag those outwards. And you can see that that line width isn't changing because we haven't ticked that box. So you can see the difference it makes not ticking it. So if we take that really small, it just looks blobby. whereas if we go bigger it starts to get finer. Okay, now if we change to scale with object, you can see it's going to keep that proportion, and we can always untick it and tick it. So if we suddenly decide, oh actually I want that a bit more open and looking more like that, then we can then go scale and scale that back down to where it needs to fit. So I'm going to take that about there, go a bit bigger and a bit bolder, it can take it. Okay, so at this point we can start to be a bit more creative. Now when we then draw the next line, you can see it's kept the same pressure as last time. So click on your pressure and you're going to reset, and that's going to just send it straight back to being that full width. So then at that point we can actually reduce that stroke, and we can even, if we press and hold Alt, we can alter the end point independently of the start point and vice versa, so that we can get a little bit of a point, like so. So then we can click off it, and again you can see when I go back to pen we've still got this same pressure selected. And let's go from here and curve that up there. And I'm just going to take that and curve that up there. So we've got a flower that we've then drawn. You could do lots of those, so let's do a little twist. Let's do 2 or 3 together in a little clump. So at the moment these are all still in their original paths, so that I haven't expanded the stroke yet. So I'm going to select all of those and group it for a moment. There we go. And then at this point we can expand our stroke. So what that does is it literally traces around the outside of our black line, so that we then have a path either side. So you can see now, Delcy, where I said if you draw your design from canvas and then scan it back in so that it does that trace on both lines, that's essentially the same process, just it's a little bit more manual. And then we're going to weld them together. At this point it's wise to go back in and just double check for anything that might have gone a bit weird when we did the merge. So you can see just here it's done this little weird thing here. Don't panic, it's not that you've done anything wrong. We're just going to move that dot and take it up there. And same here, let's move that one and we can pop that just over the top there. I'm just going to try and get to that one there, which is the one that's wrong, and just put it over the top of the other node. And there you go, we have all of our shapes as a curve that you can then cut on your scan and cut. And because it's now all converted to curves, we can now scale that anyway, and it's going to remember all those proportions, or if you want to do it so that you are doing something weird and funky, or if you want to press and hold shift and do it in proportion. Excuse me. Right, next question that somebody had, and that was about doing a sort of outline of dots around the outside of a shape. So let's go for something a bit different. Let's go for a donut. Sounds like a plan. So here's my donut, and you can see it's still got that pressure on it, so I'm just going to reset it back to normal. Okay. I'm going to convert that to curves before I start, because we want to make sure that we are offsetting the curve. We're going to duplicate it, so that's Command and J on a Mac or Control and J on a PC, and then we're going to use our offset tool. So if you're doing this in Canvas Delcy, what you would do is you would go to Edit, Offset, and go outwards. So I'm going to click and drag this to the right so that our offset is going outside our original. Okay. Then we're going to go to Bake Appearance, because we're happy with that, that's where we want it. We're going to go to our little dashed line. We're going to increase our line width. That's because we want our machine to be able to see our dots. Now what you will find with something like a circle is this bit is really easy. Okay, because there will always be a certain size of dot that will go with the width, if that makes sense. So if you look at this pattern down here, this first number is our length of our dash. That's set to 0, so that is going to be a circle. Okay, the gap of 2 is the space between them. The phase is going to be how that moves around your path. Okay, and when you have that perfect, then you have something like this circle in the centre here, where all your dots are evenly spaced. So again, at this point, we can just go and actually set that and go, that's done. So go to the layer, expand stroke, and then what you actually have is not a circle of dots, but a circle of circles. So even though they're filled at the moment, don't get fooled into thinking that what you have is a paper pricking type of thing going on, where it's just going down and up. It will actually cut out the entire of that circle. So if I then swap my fill and my stroke, you'll see more what I mean. So our path is going around the outside of that circle. So that's how we can start to add borders to our designs nice and easily. So you'll notice today's video is very much about the easy way to do things rather than it being overly complicated. So rather than doing a double line round here, I've got the computer to do the hard work for me. Rather than having to do all this intricate design work in here, I've got the computer to do the hard work for me. Now, these dots are all well and good when they're on a circle. It gets a little bit more tricky when that shape becomes a little bit more complex with corners. So I wanted to show you another way that we could work. So let's go for trapezoid, because I was trying to do this the other day as an example, but I did it really quick. So I'm going to put it as a solid stroke, and I'm going to take my width down. So that's going to be the shape that I want to cut out the middle. I'm going to duplicate it again, so Command and J, Control and J. I'm going to offset it outwards, but I'm only going to use this as a guide. So I'm going to drag this outwards, and you can see that we have curved corners where I want it to be sharp corners. So just up in contour type, you can do that in there. Delcy in Canvas, you have the option of using round corners or the corners, if that makes sense. So you just want to make sure that you're using the corners as opposed to the rounded corners. And again, I'm going to go to Bake Appearance. I'm going to lock it, and you can do that in Canvas too, because I'm just going to use it as a guide. And in Canvas you could give it an opacity of 50 just to knock it back in the same way that I'm doing here. So let's knock it back a little bit more. I'm going to click off it. So that's locked now, which means that it can't be accidentally moved. And I'm going to get my pen tool, and because we have smart guides in Affinity, and you can also have the same in Illustrator and CorelDRAW, you can see it's going to snap to the points that I've set up as a guide. So let's click on our first point, and we're going to click on our second point. So that's going to give us a line. We're going to go to our arrow tool. I'm going to go to my dotted line. I'm going to increase that line width. Now straight away you can see, hang on, it's not even starting at that beginning point of the line. And that's what that phase does. It's going to manipulate where it moves those dots along that line. So first of all, I'm going to get the dots to roughly where I want them, so they're about the same size as this. So let's take that to 7, because I know the other ones were set to 7. And I'm going to change my phase to nothing. So if I click off it, you can see I know that first circle starts dead on that point, but then over here it doesn't quite get there. So because we know that phase moves things along that line, and we definitely want that first circle to be on that point, that means we have to use our gap to move it across. Now if we were doing this as an offset round this whole shape, so i.e. using that grey line to do the dashed line, the chances of you getting it to line up those dots on each corner is tiny, absolutely tiny. So instead what you can do is we can actually do that as a more manual process by doing side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4. And you can do a little bit of cheating on this shape, because obviously those two sides are going to be the same. So let's see if we can get our gap in our dash to do our work for us. And you can see that as we increase it, we're going to get fewer dots but bigger space. So you just need to decide if that's something that you would be happy with, or whether you want them closer together. Let's go 8. Oh, a little bit more. Too far. So this is one of those things where it is a little bit fiddly, but when you're happy with it, which I am more or less, we can then go to Layer, Expand Stroke, and you see it's put all your dots in one shape up here. So here's our curve, but that dot we know isn't quite on that point. So if we use Divide, which is a very useful button, we're going to take all those dots and we're going to turn them into individual shapes. So now we can actually nudge that dot over where we know it's just a fraction off, and then we can merge them, well, space them and merge them back together. So first of all, I'm going to click all these little shapes. Then if we go up to our alignment, there's a little button here that does space horizontally, and that's just going to tweak that so that we know that space is even. And we're just going to apply it. We can then weld that back together, and we've got our line back of dots. Now if you find something weird like this going on, don't worry about that just at this time, because we're going to go and apply another dot over the top anyway. Okay, so you would then use that same process to go from this point here up to this point here. And again, you can see it's that little bit out. Now, it's a little bit more tricky to do your spacing on this one. So I will say that straight away, it's a little bit more tricky. So what I would suggest is trying to get it as close as possible in your dialogue for your dash line before trying to take it manually. Okay, so we know that's as close as we can get it, and to be honest, it's not far out, it's very, very fractionally out. So expand stroke, you can divide it again, take that top dot, and we'll just try and get it exactly where we want it. We can then select our other dots, and we can actually still do our spacing, but we have to be a bit clever about how we do it. So I'm going to go and do vertically and horizontally, and that should make sure that we do a straight line. Apply, and again we can merge those back into one shape. So pretend I've done that for the other two sides as well, and what you would then do is merge those together, and you can see that we've still got a little bit of an issue with this dot, but it's really nowhere near as much. So if we come down here and we zoom in, we can fix that. So it's got a bit of a weird thing going on here. Don't worry, grab a circle, and I'm just going to line that up there. Now bear in mind that at the moment you've still got that dash stroke on, so I'm just going to do that and reduce that right down, because what we want to do actually is that, and then we're going to pop that over the top and merge it on, and we've got a flawless circle. So there you go. That is how you would put dots around a complex shape, so that you make sure that you have a nice consistent dash going all the way round. Okay, so I think I've covered what I came on to cover. So I've done line width. If you would like me to show you another example of using that, let me know in the comments. And I've done the dots around the outside of a shape. And see you soon, Joe. So any questions before we go? This was only going to be a quick one. I just looked at the time and gone, that's longer than what I was expecting. Okay, so tomorrow I will be doing a request video, and it's going to be working on projects larger than the mat, so that we can look at the tiling function with the vinyl blade, but also how we can actually do that as a manual process as well if you don't have the vinyl blade yet. And then Thursday is going to be a surprise one, so it's going to be a 7 o'clock stream. So we will have Ian too. So that might be a bit of an interesting one to watch. We may try and do the paint bucket that we wanted to do for my birthday. On the other hand, it may be something totally different. There won't be a stream on Friday this week, just because I'm having my second jab, and I just wanted to take a little bit of time out to be nice and calm beforehand, which would be a miracle. Saturday probably won't be around too much, so we'll see how we go. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can always contact me through my profile or through Plannercraft or Plannercraft and Go Create. And also, if you want to join our group, if you're not already a member, then you can actually go in there and we'll put up a post for next week's request video shortly. So take care for now, and bye.